in the heart of a small, sun-drenched village in Africa, nestled between the golden savanna and a winding river, lived Pastor Amoki. Known for his charismatic sermons and luxurious lifestyle, Amoki was a figure who commanded both awe and suspicion. Clad in designer clothes, Gucci suits, and Prada shoes, he preached from a pulpit adorned with gold. The villagers, most of whom struggled to make ends meet, gave him their hard-earned money, believing his promise that their contributions would lead to blessings and prosperity. However, the reality was far grimmer. Pastor Amoki's wealth only grew as he built a mansion on the outskirts of the village, drove a flashy car, and indulged in opulent feasts, while the villagers continued to live in poverty, often going hungry. Despite their hardships, they were convinced that their sacrifices were necessary for divine favor, as Amoki warned them of dire consequences if they did not give generously. One day, a young boy named Kofi arrived in the village. Kofi was an orphan, his parents lost in a brutal tribal war that had left him scarred but resilient. He found a new home in the local orphanage, a place where kindness was the currency and hope was nurtured. Kofi had been taught about Yesu, the true essence of faith and love, by the orphanage's caretaker, a wise old woman who had lived through the village's many changes. Kofi noticed the disparity between Pastor Amoki's teachings and the reality he saw around him. The villagers were suffering, and yet they continued to give all they had to the pastor. One day, he bravely stood up in the village square and began to speak. "Brothers and sisters," Kofi began, his voice clear and strong despite his youth. "Yesu does not want your money to build mansions or buy fancy cars. Yesu teaches us to love one another, to help those in need, and to share what we have." At first, the villagers were shocked. How could this boy, an orphan, dare to question Pastor Amoki? But Kofi continued, sharing stories from the teachings of Yesu, emphasizing compassion, humility, and community. Yesu lived simply, loved the poor, and taught us that true wealth is in our hearts, in how we treat each other, Kofi explained. It's not about giving money to build big houses for one man. It's about making sure we all have enough to eat, that we all have a place to sleep, and that no one suffers alone. His words resonated with the villagers, who had long felt a deep, unspoken unease about Pastor Amoki's demands. Slowly, they began to question the pastor's teachings and look inward, realizing that they had been blinded by the false promises of wealth and prosperity. As the villagers' faith in Pastor Amoki waned, they turned to each other, creating a more supportive community. They shared their resources, helped rebuild homes, and ensured that everyone had enough food. The orphanage, once struggling, became a center of the village's new spirit of generosity and care, with Kofi playing a pivotal role in this transformation. Pastor Amoki, seeing his influence diminish, attempted to regain control by discrediting Kofi, but the villagers had already made up their minds. They could see the truth of Jesus' teachings in their own lives now, in the kindness and solidarity they experienced daily. They stopped attending Amoki's extravagant services and instead gathered in simple, heartfelt meetings where they shared their joys and sorrows, prayed together, and helped each other. In time, Pastor Amoki left the village, his lavish lifestyle no longer supported by the community he had once exploited.